Half-Life and its sequels never seem to run out of good community-made content. Despite the games being decades old, there's still a huge, active and vibrant modding community. In recent years, we've seen plenty of major projects come to completion. Beloved mods like Half-Life Echoes have been released for free to the public, and some creators have even seen commercial success making the transition from a mere mod into a full game, like Black Mesa and G-String. And between those numerous big releases, there's still a good number of smaller map packs and betas of larger mods to play around with, like the recently released Raising the Bar Redux 1.2. However, sadly, a lot of these releases are easy to overlook. One such mod is Snowdrop Escape. Snowdrop Escape is certainly one of the better, more ambitious mods to come out in recent years. It's based in the Half-Life universe and, like many of the expansion packs of old, gives us a fresh look at the world through a different lens. For a source mod, it's incredibly expansive, giving players new mechanics, weapons and environments to explore. There are even new enemies, though they all function similarly to those we've seen in previous games. This may all sound very impressive, but in reality the best part of the mod is the overall game design. It's a little unpolished and clunky in some places, but as a whole, the gameplay and pacing are just amazing. Snowdrop Escape starts you off at a secret outpost run by an alliance of two factions, Aperture Science and Radio Him. You're some kind of mercenary who's been hired by the Alliance for an important job. You arrive by boat and are given a little time to explore your surroundings before you are given your briefing. I like the fact that you're given a little freedom before being thrust into a cutscene or thrown headfirst into actual gameplay. Although there's not much to interact with, there is a small tutorial on how the explosive mines work in the game. Once you arrive at your boss's office, you are given the rundown of your mission. It's a pretty straightforward affair. Enter a facility, clear out the rebels, activate the briefcase and escape. After the briefing, you head straight to the roof to board the chopper and head straight off to the mission field. Your first task is stocking up on weapons from an allied camp. Why you're not given these before, I don't know, but hey, it keeps the story going. Once you arrive though, things don't go as planned as the rebels have looted everything in the camp that's been stored there. You're then left unarmed to enter the facility. Like the early segments of most Half-Life titles, a good chunk of the game leaves you fighting with melee-only weapons. To mix things up a bit, Snowdrop Escape doesn't hold back on its own punches, immediately pitching you against poison headcrabs and fast zombies. You're given a flare gun to help you out, but it's pretty slow to reload. It's got a slow time to kill and minimal ammo. If the worst comes to the worst, it's best to stick with melee. Before long, you do get access to more weapons, and the game increases your arsenal at a good pace. Every 20 minutes or so, you can expect to find a new gun as you make your way through the side buildings and into the main complex. Everything up until the halfway mark is pretty standard stuff. There's minimal story in the first section as you're literally just progressing towards your objective. However, once you get there, the game starts to get a lot more interesting. Within the heart of the lab, you start to uncover the work Aperture Science has been doing with parallel worlds. There's a couple of great sequences here I don't want to spoil, that are worth playing through yourself. It gets a little weird in places, but this is weird in a good way, and it doesn't feel too much like it's out of left field. From here on out, your mission proceeds pretty much as it was explained to you in the briefing. You fill the lab with gas, causing the rebels to flee, and make your way to the exit. However, it's at this point that you understand why the game is called Snowdrop Escape. The now alerted Combine are also onto you, and you'll have to make your way past waves of Combine soldiers as you try and escape the city. I was quite impressed with the game's ending, that I won't spoil, but I will say that you should stick around once the credits roll, as there's a fun post-credit sequence. Unlike many Half-Life 2 mods, Snowdrop Escape introduces you to an entirely new arsenal. Okay, that's not totally true. There are a few returning weapons, but everything functions a little differently to what it normally would do. The first thing you'll notice is that most weapons now have an iron sights option. As you'd expect, this makes aiming a little easier, but it also feels a little slow and unresponsive. In most titles this mechanic is quite snappy, but here, even when you're actually fully engaged, the iron sights, it feels like there's a slight delay between the completed animation and your ability to fire. This doesn't impact the flow of the game too much, but it does feel like your enemies often manage to land the first hit as you sluggishly try and take aim. As mentioned already, there are a lot of new weapons in the roster, and you've now been given a limited carry system. Each of the 5 weapon slots can now only hold one weapon at a time, and it can be difficult to tell what weapon can go where. I like the variety though. If you choose to take an automatic primary, you can also carry a shotgun as a sidearm by selecting the sword-off over the pistol. As you progress through the game, more and more weapons become available to choose from. Against the Combine, you'll be able to select the usual AR-2 and shotgun. In Rebel territory, you'll be able to pick up new weapons like the FAMAS and the AK. The gameplay is really well paced throughout. Combat segments are woven between puzzle and exploration segments. None of these segments outstay their welcome either. You really cannot fault the game's flow. It's even better than many modern titles. Each chapter of the game, as well as being well paced, is given its own unique puzzles, environments, enemies to fight, and weapons to plunder. In one section, you'll be matching up computer units, in another you'll be finding the code for an intricate lock puzzle. You're always given something new to do or think about, which is really refreshing. As high praise as this might be, the game's not without its faults. There are plenty of areas where I felt incredibly frustrated. One of these sections is an arena fight against waves of fast zombies, whilst you wait for a lift. The waiting for a lift scenario is a pretty classic video game trope, and in most games it works well. It piles on the pressure until escape arrives. However, here, even on the normal difficulty, the scenario is just frustratingly difficult. Fast zombies aren't the problem in this section. It's the chains that slow you down when you touch them. It's the limited space and the slow build-up of enemies that you just can't kill fast enough, especially if you're unlucky enough to have a few fast head crabs survive after you've downed their host. After 3 or 4 tries, I ended up cheesing the whole segment hiding behind the fallen stairs. I'd hate to knock the game's art style, but it's not its strongest point. Whilst a lot of the art is taken directly from other Source Engine games, that's understandable given that Valve encouraged that sort of thing. There's certainly plenty of custom assets here too, giving the mod a unique feel of its own. Most areas of the game look visually pleasing, though things can feel a little tight, cramped and clustered. This isn't usually an issue, but on occasion many of the physics props inhibit movement. It's no wonder that newer Source Engine games have opted for more static props than physics ones. It's easy to criticise any mod for its imperfections though. However, for a free game, Snowdrop Escape is absolutely outstanding. The Snowdrop Escape dev team have managed to create a competent Half-Life 2 mod that attempts something new, introduces some new mechanics and weapons to the mix, and have executed it all to a very high standard. I really hope this mod doesn't fly under the radar. It's a well thought out campaign, with good pacing and interesting mechanics. Most of the off-putting elements can easily be put down to the Source Engine jankiness. Overall, Snowdrop Escape is a breath of fresh, crisp winter air. If you've a spare hour or two and want to enjoy a cup of Half-Life 2 nostalgia, then give Snowdrop Escape a quick look. It's the kind of mod you just can't go wrong with.